Welcome to our Thursday's broadcast of the Gospel Truth. Today I'm continuing to teach on how to find, follow, and fulfill God's will. And this is actually 3 teachings combined into one. I used to teach these separately, but we put them all into one book, How to Find, Follow, and Fulfill God's Will. And I'm drawing to a close on teaching how to follow God's will. I spent 2 weeks talking about how to find God's will, and then this is just about the end of 2 weeks. Tomorrow will be 2 weeks teaching on how to follow God's will. And I've spent most of my time talking about Moses and how Moses, even though he knew God's plan for his life, he missed it the first time because he tried to bring it to pass in his own strength and power, and he was unaware of the timing of God. And I've been making a lot of points out of that. So what I'm going to say today is a continuation of these things. If you've missed any of this, I encourage you to please get this teaching because it all fits together and it'll have a much greater impact if you get it in its context. And that's the reason we're making all of these products available. Let me use Psalms chapter 37 and in verse 4. Let me just read from verses 1 through verse 4. It says, "Fret not thyself because of evildoers, neither be thou envious against the workers of iniquity, for they shall soon be cut down as the grass, and wither as the green herb. Trust in the Lord and do good, so shalt thou dwell in the land, and verily thou shalt be fed. Delight thyself also in the Lord, and He shall give thee the desires of thine heart." I want to point out in this 4th verse, when it says, delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart. This isn't saying that God will just fulfill whatever your desires are, whether they're godly desires, ungodly desires, just whatever it is that you desire. If you'll delight yourself in the Lord, He'll just give you the desires, whatever it is that you want. I don't believe that that's what this verse is talking about, because I know some people that, man, they desire some ungodly things. There's many scriptures that talk about that, the ways of man are the ends of death, that there's a way that seems right unto a man, but the ends thereof are the ways of death, that God's ways are higher than our ways, etc. And so not everything that we desire is something that God is just going to give us. But I believe that what this is saying, this is the way that God has spoken this to me, is that when you delight yourself in the Lord, God will put His desires in your heart. Now that is totally different. Instead of God just giving me whatever I'd want, God puts His desires in my heart so that when I am really delighting myself in the Lord, I can follow the desires of my heart. That's quite a statement. I was raised in a church that actually taught this when they were talking about how to find God's will. They said, if you will just do whatever, if you will take your first reaction, whatever it is that you want to do, and do the exact opposite, then that's God's will. And you know what? That's true if the person that you're talking to is a total carnal Christian. It says over in Romans chapter 8 that the carnal mind is not subject to the law of God, neither indeed can be, so then they that are in the flesh cannot please God. If you are a carnal person, and I could spend time defining that, but just basically, if you are a self-centered person, if you are living by yourself, not under the inspiration and the leadership of God, but you're just living for yourself and by yourself, that's what a carnal person is. And you could take your desires and do the opposite, and that's nearly always God. That's true for a carnal person. But what that misses is when you say something like that, you don't have to be carnal. You can be a spiritual person. You can get to where you delight yourself in the Lord and you put God first. And when you do that, when you are putting God first in your life, God will supernaturally change your desires to match up with His desires. Now, we're talking about how to find, follow, and fulfill God's will. And I'm telling you, this is this is probably, I don't know that I could say it's the number one way that God guides me. I'd probably have to say that's Scripture. But there are so many decisions you have to make that you can't just find a specific Scripture. Like, for instance, I just had an opportunity last night come up to go and reach millions, actually billions of Muslims on this new network that's being broadcast out of Pakistan. And you know what? I don't have a scripture that says go on that network in Pakistan. I can't find that in Scripture. But I can find Scripture that tells me that we're supposed to go into all the world and preach the gospel. I can find Scriptures that give me a general path and direction for my life. And then on something specific, like do I go on this network? Do I take advantage of this opportunity that was given me? I let the peace of God rule in my heart. And if it's something I desire to do, if it's something that, it just really excites me and blesses me, well, then I do it because I have delighted myself in the Lord. Now, all of this is conditional upon you delighting yourself in the Lord. If you aren't truly delighting yourself in the Lord, if you aren't putting God first, if you aren't seeking Him, and the Scripture says the heart knows its own bitterness, you know whether you are or not. You might be able to fool me or somebody else, but are you really seeking God? Are you really committed to God? Are you in love with God and putting Him first in your life? If you are, then I believe you can trust that the desires that come into your heart are from God and you can follow those desires. So when I read this email last night about this new opportunity that came up, I first of all go to the Word. Does this contradict anything in the Word? Is it consistent with the Word? Well, the Word says go into all the world and preach the gospel. I'm supposed to reach as far and as deep with the gospel as I can. So it doesn't contradict anything that I see in the Word. But does that mean that I'm supposed to do it? Well, I sit there and I got so excited about this. Man, I have a desire to go on this network and start reaching out to over 2 billion Muslims that this network reaches. And so you know what? Because I'm delighting myself in the Lord, what I will do is just go and pray about it. And the more I focus on God and the more I delight myself in the Lord, if the desire continues and increases, then I take that as being God's leadership. If the more I seek God and the more focused on God I get, the desire diminishes, well, then I look at that as just being my flesh. And this is how I decide so many things. When I started on television, this is basically how that God spoke to me about going on television. I never had a word out of heaven. I never heard an audible voice. I didn't have a vision. It wasn't anything. It's just that God called me to preach the gospel, and He told me to reach as many people as I could. And I spent decades on radio and focused on hundreds of radio stations, but I knew that eventually, someday I'd be on television. I had been on other people's television programs, and I had very good success from it, and so I just knew it was in the future, but I didn't know when. And I actually had people that wanted to buy airtime and put me on television, and yet I just didn't have peace about it. I didn't have a desire to do it. I knew that someday I would do it, but I didn't have a desire at that time to do it. And I turned down a number of opportunities. And then in the summer of 1998, I was praying about a number of different things, and the Lord put a desire in my heart to go on television. I don't know how to explain this to you, but I was actually against it. I knew that someday it was for me, but I was against it at that time. I saw the potential risk. I knew how expensive it would be. I knew that in a sense, if this wasn't God, it could destroy the ministry. And so because of it, I just never was excited about being on television. It didn't bless me. There was no desire for it. But in the summer of 1998, as I was praying about some things, boom, just like that, my desires changed. And I got so excited thinking about television that I actually sat down and drew a set very similar to this set that we have right here. I saw what it was going to be like. I knew that I wasn't going to be standing up and preaching in a three-piece suit and doing the traditional Christian programming that I had seen. And I saw me sitting down and just like talking to people across the table, just like you were sitting right here. I saw these things and I got so excited. My desires just made a 180-degree turn. Boom, just like this. In a matter of an hour, everything changed. And you know what? I went to this scripture and I said, Lord, am I delighting myself in you? Are these desires that you put in my heart, or is this something I'm desiring? It was so contrary to the way that I had been feeling for decades that I suspicioned immediately that it was God that put this desire in my heart. But you know what I did? I just took some time. I started fasting and praying and separated myself and focused on God. Spent a lot of time just meditating on the Word, praying, worshiping the Lord. And the more focused on God I got, the more I delighted myself in the Lord, the stronger the desire to go on television got. And you know what? That's how God spoke to me and told me it was time to go on television. And so there was a lot of other things that had to fall in place. But that's how this whole thing came to pass. And when we started on television, January the 3rd, 2000, our ministry just exploded. And matter of fact, the Lord spoke to me on July the 26th of 1999, and this was in a dream, and He just spoke to me in this dream, and He says, it's time to give birth. And I got up in the middle of the night, I studied it, and the long story made short is that the Lord told me that I'm just now birthing our ministry when I started on television, that if something would have happened and if I would have died prior to me starting on television, January the 3rd, 2000, that I would have missed God's real purpose for my life. And it has proven to be true. I mean, my ministry just took off when we started on television. And all of this happened through a desire of my heart. Did you know that the exact same thing happened with our Bible college? And some of you have heard me give these things before, but it's just a testimony, a current day, modern testimony to this verse of how God leads us and how we follow God through the desires of our heart. I had never wanted a Bible school. I'd had a lot of people ask me to start a Bible school, but I had seen people who graduated from Bible schools who were an embarrassment to the kingdom. And I didn't want to start producing people like that. And anyway, there was a lot of reasons that I had, but I just never wanted a Bible school. And then in the summer, it was June, I think the 22nd of 1993, I was in England holding a meeting, and a man was teaching about making disciples, and I was just in 100% agreement with everything he was saying. He made one statement that I hadn't heard before, and that statement was that if you aren't raising up people that can do what you're doing, then you're ultimately a failure, because you aren't going to live forever. And if you don't raise up somebody to replace you and continue on sharing the gospel, then you're ultimately a failure. And that was just a different way of saying some things that I already felt about discipleship. And boy, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. And I decided, God, I've got to do more to make disciples. And as I prayed about it that very day, God put in my heart a different way of doing Bible college, where it's not just intellectual, it's not just academic, but you could actually affect the hearts of people. You could make disciples, you could mentor people. And it's a new concept in doing Bible school. So anyway, when I saw this and the Lord spoke to me, immediately I just desired a Bible school. I got so excited about it. That was in June of 1993. I actually tried to open the Bible school in August of 93 with only 2 months preparation, and I just couldn't do it. It couldn't get everything together. So we had to open in August of 1994. And it was about 14 months after the Lord first spoke to me. But I mean, that's how excited about it I got. I went from never wanting a Bible school to where I couldn't wait to have a Bible school. The desires of my heart just changed completely. And you know what? That's one of the ways that you follow the leading of God. Again, let me emphasize, it says, delight yourself also in the Lord, and He shall give thee the desires of thy heart. You can't trust your own desires and just go by your desires if you aren't seeking God. If you're a carnal Christian, if you are not really in love with God and yielded to Him, if you haven't made this total commitment that we started this whole series with in Romans chapter 12, verse 1, about make yourself a living sacrifice, if you haven't done that, you can't just trust the desires that's in your heart. But if you have made that commitment, this is one of the dominant ways that God gives us direction and leadership, is just through the desires of our heart. Let me bring this illustration out. When you first got born again, some of you were living in sin, sexual, maybe stealing money. You might have been doing dope. You might have been an alcoholic. You might have been all of these kind of things. And you delighted and enjoyed in that. But when you got born again, boom, I mean, your desires change. Some of you, things that you had done for years and that you thought you'd never get free of, you just turned from it. You hated it. You know what? When you delighted yourself in the Lord, when you made Jesus your Lord, God started putting new desires in your heart. And things that used to excite you, now you just hate them. You can't even imagine that you ever did those kind of things. So if you would just think about it, most of you have already experienced this, that when you come to the Lord, He just starts putting new desires in your heart. There are some of you that prior to you getting born again, you couldn't have ever imagined yourself going to church, giving money in tithe. That's the farthest thing from your mind. You thought people were crazy that took a portion of what they had and gave it to the church. And yet, when you got born again, all of a sudden, God put this desire in your heart and He just changed everything. If you would stop and think about this, most of us have already experienced this. And it's one of the ways that you know that God is leading you, because this is just totally contrary to your past nature, your carnal self. You know, I was in Seagoville, Texas, and I ministered in a little church there in downtown Seagoville for 2 years. This is the very first church that I ever pastored. And Seagoville was a small place. It wasn't an exciting place. And anyway, I had a lot of people come see me and they thought, why don't you leave this place and go someplace that people want you? We were meeting in a little old bank building downtown, and we had usually around 5 or 6 people there. Sometimes we got up to as many as 12 or 15, I think was our big attendance. And I did everything I knew. We saw some blind eyes open there. I prayed for people. We were seeing miracles, but it's just people weren't responding. I don't know, there's multiple reasons. But I had so many people tell me, just leave this place. Get out of there. But you know what? I loved it in Seagoville, Texas. I mean, I prayed for those people. I was committed to staying there forever if that's what it took. And I mean, friends would tell me, leave. Here's another opportunity. Come over here and minister. And I'd say, nope, God's called me here. And I just stayed there. I stayed there for 2 years. And then one day, I was down at our church building. I was the only one there. And I was just praying. And I was walking back and forth praying. And I looked out the windows and I looked at downtown Seagoville. And all of a sudden, it's like I just saw it different than I'd ever seen it. Instead of being in love with this place, I just thought, what am I doing here? Who would live in Seagoville, Texas? Now, I'm not saying this to demean anybody who lives there. I've still got friends in Seagoville. But I'm saying that all of a sudden, my whole feelings about that place changed. And I wanted out of there just as quickly as I could get out. And the change was so dramatic. I mean, the day before, I was absolutely in love with it. I was excited. I was willing to stay there forever. And within just an hour's time, my whole desires changed and I wanted out of there. I thought, what am I doing here? God, get me out of this place. It was such a dramatic change that I said, this can't be just me. I can't change that quickly. My emotions can't change that quickly. I said, this has got to be a supernatural thing. And so I spent another 2 or 3 hours down at the church praying, trying to figure out, was this demonic? Was it Satan attacking me and trying to draw me away from what God had called me to do? Or was it God that had told me that my time in that town was up and He wanted me to go someplace else? And after a couple of hours of just focusing upon the Lord and seeking Him, my desire to leave Seagoville, Texas was stronger than ever. And so based on this verse, delight yourself also in the Lord, and He shall give thee the desires of thine heart. This was such a dramatic change in my desires that after a couple hours of praying about it, I was absolutely convinced that God wanted me to leave Seagoville, Texas. Now, I didn't have anywhere else to go, but I just knew that I was supposed to go. And as I was praying about it, this was like in September, something like that, I prayed about it and I felt like on November the 1st, I was supposed to leave. And so I prayed about it, and then I headed home, and I was going to tell Jamie, because Jamie was just as committed to being there as I was, and I thought, how am I going to share this with Jamie? I don't have a word from the Lord. I didn't see a vision. There wasn't a bolt of lightning. It was just, this is what I feel in my heart. It's just the desire that I have. So I went home to tell Jamie what had happened, and when I got home, there was a for sale sign in our front yard. And so I went in and I asked Jamie, I said, what is all of this? What is a for sale sign? And she said, our landlord called and said that she's selling the house and that we have to be out on November the 1st. It was the exact day that God had given me. It was a confirmation, and we left Seagoville, Texas, and you know what? It was God's will for us to go there. It was God's will for us to leave. And how did all of this come to pass? Through just delighting myself in the Lord, and God gave me the desires of my heart. I'm telling you, that's how God leads you. This is one of the main ways that God speaks to you. When I finally went to Pritchett, Colorado, I went from Seagoville, I moved to Childress, Texas, and I stayed there for 2 years. And then I was driving to Colorado Springs, and we decided to drive through Kim, Colorado. If you've never been in those places, you don't have a clue how close to the end of the earth Pritchett and Kim, Colorado is. But I had a friend who was pastoring a church in Kim, Colorado, so we decided to drive through Kim and then go to Colorado Springs where I was going to hold a meeting. And as we drove through Pritchett on our way to Kim, Colorado, which was 30 miles from Pritchett, I remember driving through that, and this was a little tiny town. It was totally flat. I thought all of Colorado had mountains in it, but this portion was totally flat. The only trees in all of Baca County were in towns where people had planted them. And we drove through Pritchett, Colorado, and I remember joking with the people with me, and I said, you know what, I think God must be calling you here. And I was saying, thus saith the Lord. And I was joking around with Don Crow and his wife, Wendy, that were in the car with me. And after I got through, I said, who would live in this God-forsaken place? Who would ever minister in Pritchett, Colorado? It wasn't a week until God had called me to go there. And you know what? One of the ways that I knew that it was God was because I told you how I felt before. And when the invitation was given and people told me that I was supposed to come, I just fell in love with that place, and I desired to be there. It was consistent with God telling me to go unto the ends of the earth. And boy, Pritchett, Colorado, if that isn't the end of the earth, it's so close you can see it from there. I mean, that's how bad it was. And I went there based on the desire that was in my heart. You know, I've given you about 4 or 5 testimonies of major times that I followed God and followed His leading, and it's all based on this scripture about delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart. Again, this has to be qualified that if you aren't seeking God, you don't need to follow the desires of your heart, because the carnal mind is enmity with God. But if you are delighting yourself in the Lord and following Him, you can follow the desires of your heart. That's how you follow God.
Recently, Andrew Wommack made a stunning public confession.
On October the 4th, God spoke to me and showed me through Mark chapter 10, verses 29 and 30, when you receive back houses and lands and all of these things, that you will be persecuted. I had never seen that this persecution was because of the blessing of God. And I was fearing persecution over prosperity. Now that was a new wrinkle in my brain.
Specifically, Andrew feared that he was offending and overtaxing his friends and partners with the mounting pace for completing the Charis Bible College campus in Woodland Park, Colorado.
But when I did that, the Lord started speaking to me that I was again beginning to think too small. I was limiting God. And man, I repented to the Lord. God is the one who told me about starting a Bible college. Then God told me that we needed to turn this into a first-class Bible college campus that is going to be, I believe, the premier Bible college anywhere in the world. I'm not going to be ashamed of it. I'm not going to backpedal. I am not going to be apologetic. God is doing something absolutely supernatural, something that I've never seen. We've started building a Bible college campus up in Woodland Park, Colorado. We call the whole 157 acres the sanctuary, a place dedicated to the glory of God. We've built our first building that I call a barn. We are in the process of building our second building, the 3,200-seat auditorium, but my vision goes way beyond that.
The Lord has also led Andrew to install a parking garage and a multi-purpose activity center and restaurant facility, as well as to provide high-quality student lodging naturally integrated within the picturesque property.
And I believe that this is what the Lord is leading me to do in just the next few years. And you know, this is what I'm calling my 2020 vision. God has spoken to me to get back to accelerate this construction again and get things going. And I really believe that by the end of 2020, we need to have all of those buildings that you saw in that little 3D animation completed. And so I am ramping this construction back up. And I tell you, I believe that the gospel and training up people and making disciples is the world's last and best hope. And I believe that what we're doing is absolutely essential. And in order to do this, I've prayed about this, and the Lord has told me that before He told me to do this, He's already spoken to people. The scripture says in 2 Corinthians, God will give seed to the sower. If you desire to give, then God will give seed to you. He'll give you money. He will help you do it. If you say, well, I'd love to be a part of this, but I just don't have it. Well, I believe right now, I'm saying in the name of the Lord, that God is going to bless you. And when that blessing comes, remember that it's because you wanted to be a sower, and God is giving seed to the sower. So I know that God is speaking to people right now. And I'm just asking you to pray and do whatever you feel God wants you to do. I pray and agree with you that God is going to provide supernatural supply, abundant blessing, that you are going to have money come at you from unusual sources so that you can be a giver, so that not only can you help us do what God's told me to do, but so that you will be blessed. And I just believe that. I speak that over you in the name of the Lord.
Andrew's 5-year vision is to complete construction of the plans God has given him for the sanctuary by the year 2020. And God's vision for tomorrow begins with you today. Along with Andrew, we invite you to take the limits off God in your own life and participate in the 2020 vision by becoming a grace partner with Andrew Wommack Ministries.
I just know that I'm going to be taking the limits off God the rest of my life. And I believe that the same thing is true for every one of you. And so together, we're going to get this done.
Call our helpline or go to awmi.net and become a grace partner today.